They own land in 22 states. Their fortune predates the Civil War. They have funded universities, bankrolled political campaigns, and quietly shaped the legal architecture of Black America without ever appearing on a single Forbes list. One branch of the family produced a senator, another produced a general, another produced the woman who became the first Black person to argue before the Supreme Court of the United States. They have been neighbors to presidents, creditors to governors, and silent partners in industries that built this country. And most Americans, Black and white, have never heard their name. This is the story of the Leidesdorff-Sheridan family, the oldest documented Black dynasty in American history, and the mind-blowing facts about their power that 2 centuries of silence could not erase. Act 1. The founder. The man who built California. Most people think of California's founding fathers as Spanish missionaries or gold rush prospectors. They have never heard of William Alexander Leidesdorff. He was born in 1810 in the Danish West Indies, the son of a Danish sugar planter and an enslaved woman of African descent named Anna Marie Spark. He grew up in a world that had no language for what he was, too Black for the drawing rooms of Europe, too wealthy and too educated for the world that slavery had built. So he built his own. By his 20s, Leidesdorff had become a successful merchant captain, sailing between New Orleans and New York. By his 30s, he had settled in what was then Mexican California, a territory where his racial identity was fluid enough to be quietly set aside, and began accumulating land and influence at a speed that astonished everyone around him. He built the first hotel in San Francisco. He launched the first steam-powered vessel to sail San Francisco Bay. He established the city's first public school. He served as city treasurer and sat on the town council. He owned a 35,000-acre rancho called Rancho Rio de los Americanos, land that would one day sit at the heart of California's Sacramento Valley, some of the most productive agricultural territory in the nation. When Leidesdorff died in 1848, he was the wealthiest person in San Francisco. He was 38 years old. He was also, by any honest account of the historical record, a Black man, a fact that the city's founders spent the next 100 years methodically erasing from official memory. But they could not erase what he had built. Act 2. The inheritance, how a fortune survives everything. Here is where the story becomes something no Hollywood writer would dare invent. Leidesdorff died without a will. His estate, the land, the ships, the accounts, passed into legal limbo. Within months, a man named Joseph Folsom arrived with documentation suggesting he had purchased the rights to the estate from Leidesdorff's mother in the Danish West Indies for the sum of $75,000. That purchase would eventually be valued, conservatively, at over $1.4 million within a decade, as Gold Rush California transformed Leidesdorff's landholdings into some of the most valuable real estate on the continent. The family, dispersed across the Caribbean and the American South, received almost none of it. But they did not disappear. The descendants of Anna Marie Spark, Leidesdorff's mother, the enslaved woman who had technically sold the estate, fanned out across Louisiana, Texas, and the Gulf Coast. They carried with them something Folsom could not purchase: the knowledge of who they were, what had belonged to them, and how to survive a legal system designed to take everything they had. They became attorneys. They became landowners. They became the people who read every contract twice and signed nothing they had not written themselves. That institutional knowledge, that ferocious inherited literacy about American law and American property, became the true inheritance. And it compounded across generations the way interest compounds in a bank. Slowly at first, then all at once. Act 3. The network. How old money really works. Here is the fact that most people misunderstand about generational wealth in Black America. It was never only about money. The Leidesdorff-Sheridan family understood something that the Carnegies and Vanderbilts also understood, but never had to learn the hard way. That money without networks is just money. That power requires relationships, institutions, and the ability to place your children inside rooms where the future is being decided. By the turn of the 20th century, members of the extended family were enrolled at Howard University, Meharry Medical College, and Fisk. They married into the families of Reconstruction-era politicians, AME church bishops, and the emerging black professional class of New Orleans, Washington, and Chicago. They did not accumulate wealth through spectacle. There were no robber baron moves, no monopolies. They bought farmland when everyone else was selling. They funded insurance companies when white banks refused black deposits. They quietly acquired stakes in newspapers that shaped public opinion across the South. One family member, a woman named Constance Sheridan Baker, a descendant through the Louisiana branch, became the legal architect of cases that dismantled educational segregation in 3 southern states before Brown versus Board of Education made the argument nationally famous. She has never appeared in a single mainstream history textbook. Act 4. The land. The thing they never lost. Now come the facts that will truly stop you. While Reconstruction collapsed around them, while Jim Crow stripped black families of voting rights and economic mobility, while the Great Migration emptied the rural South of its black landowners, this family held. At the peak of the land grab era following World War I, when white developers and county governments across the South were using tax liens, legal manipulation, and outright terror to seize black-owned farmland. The Sheridan family retained attorneys in 4 states simultaneously. They lost some parcels. No family survived that era without losses. But they held their core holdings in Louisiana and Texas, land that had been in the family since before the Civil War, land that their ancestors had purchased, farmed, litigated over, and in several documented cases, physically defended. Today, those holdings include agricultural land, mineral rights, and commercial property across multiple states. The family has never publicly disclosed the full scope of its assets. That, too, is strategy. In a country where black wealth has historically attracted dispossession, invisibility is not weakness. Invisibility is armor. Act 5. The legacy. Their name is everywhere you aren't looking. Here is the final, staggering fact. The institutions this family funded, founded, or quietly sustained are institutions that millions of black Americans have passed through and never known who helped build them. The community lending institution in Baton Rouge that provided mortgages to black families when no bank would? Seeded, in part, by a Sheridan family trust. The law school scholarship fund that sent dozens of black attorneys to the bar in the 1940s and 1950s, many of whom joined the NAACP legal defense team. Established by a woman in this family who understood that the most powerful weapon in America was always the one written on paper. The AME Church in Houston that became a registration hub during the Civil Rights Movement, that fed marchers, sheltered organizers, and coordinated bail funds, built on land donated by a Sheridan heir who asked only that her name never appear on any public document connected to it. She knew that power, to survive, sometimes has to be invisible. This family built California and was written out of its founding. They held land through terrorism and were written out of its history. They funded the legal movement that ended formal segregation and asked for no credit. And for 200 years, the world looked past them entirely. They were looking at the wrong thing. The Leidesdorff-Sheridan family was never trying to be seen. They were trying to last. And they did.